Welcome, everyone, to the Inside Story podcast, where we take you behind the scenes of building diverse businesses and becoming a successful entrepreneur. I'm your host, Dursun Halimova, a business coach and facilitator on a mission to help build impactful businesses. And today, I'm super excited to host Lisa Burke on the Inside Story. Lisa is a seasoned broadcaster, moderator, as well as public speaking coach. Lisa has a rich background in live TV, having worked over a decade at Sky News in London. Currently, Lisa hosts her own show called The Lisa Burke Show in Luxembourg on RTL Today. Lisa also has an academic background and passion in science, and currently she is hosting, moderating, facilitating a number of international events here in Luxembourg as well as internationally, focused on science, technology, innovation. Lisa, it's great to have you on the Inside Story podcast. Welcome.
Thank you so much, Dursun, and thank you also for everything that you're doing for the community, and welcome to Luxembourg.
Yeah, thank you so much. On the Inside Story podcast, one of the things I really try to do is bring diverse entrepreneurs, people who are either building big businesses or small businesses, tech, non-tech, as well as those who are kind of using their expertise to create business around themselves and their abilities, right? And I think this is where you come in. I don't know if you ever looked at yourself as an entrepreneur, but having observed you from the far, from the distance, I think you are a great representation of an entrepreneur. In my eyes, as I see it, you have managed to build a patchwork, right? Focusing around your passions, your talents, things that you love doing and you are good at, and somehow build portfolio of services that you can provide.
No. Well, thank you very much. I feel very honored to be part of your show. And you're right. I don't think I would have ever thought about myself as an entrepreneur for a long time. But in some small ways, I am, if one counts that as managing your own time and creating your own business. So I've sort of done that. I should say I have done that. I rather than the kind of British Irish way of we should be proud of what we. I'm not always, but we should try to be anyway. Yeah, and I think it came about. I mean, if I think back to my childhood, I remember my father saying, you should really try to be in charge of your own time. He always was a promoter of time being the most valuable resource. And he's right. I mean, in the middle of my life, at least, I realized that time, as my wonderful grandmother Alice also said, it just goes too fast. It is more precious than anything else. And so we have to think about that wisely. I think the entrepreneurship, it was pushed upon me in a way when we started moving country with my ex-husband's work and when I had young children, because he was in foreign news, and whenever anything happened, I always was filling in the gaps with the childcare, and I always wanted to do a good job. And so back when my children were born, I was still at Sky News, and there were literally, I went back to work full time when my first daughter was 6 months old. I actually went back to work when she was 3 months old, but she came with me when I was doing these quite intensive reports. But at 6 months, literally the day I went back, he was in Afghanistan for 3 weeks, and I was starting at 4:30 in the morning. So I was always fighting with childcare and trying to do a good job, and then having to be the one at home. It's much easier when they get older. They can walk and talk and look after themselves, but not when they're small. So I think a lot of women are forced into thinking entrepreneurially. And back in London, I saw a lot of my cohort giving up work because work versus childcare costs. They thought, well, why am I paying someone else to look after my child? So that is already one incentive for women to create their own cottage industries, if you want to use that phrase, because you become in charge of your own time and you can fit it around family life. Of course, now we know it's possible because COVID happened, but women have known it's possible for a long time. It doesn't mean it's easy, because working from home or creating something from home is a starting point. Um, you can always find other jobs. If I look at that way, I'll see, as I mentioned before, there'll be paperwork, life admin, etc. So there's always other things to do. So you have to be quite disciplined about setting up something from home. But I think the idea of setting something up when one starts to have a family becomes quite instinctive, because you're pulled in so many different directions. To answer your question in a very long way,
No, great. Thank you so much. Indeed. I think I want to say moms specifically. Of course, women in general, I think are great at organizing things, organizing their lives and other people's lives, right? They are in charge of so many things, and especially mom. And as a full-time employee as well as full-time mom, it's very, very difficult. I always look up to women like you who somehow magically manage everything.
I just want to throw it back to you because I don't know your situation exactly, but I should also add the trailing spouse element here, which, we're probably speaking to that audience. And of course, the trailing spouse, I don't know the percentages, but there's a high proportion that are female. And so you are again, and in a way, if you're trailing without children, in some ways it's trickier because you're having to make a network from scratch again. So it's always about making the network.
Indeed. I think a lot of people here in Luxembourg are here because they have followed their partners and now they have to basically, build their own community. And that's the challenge also. I moved here as a solopreneur, not having a job, just like you when you moved to Luxembourg, right? Not having the work environment, colleagues, teammates that would provide kind of easy access and make your settling in process easier. When you are on your own, it is much harder because then you have to consciously plan and think about how you are going to meet people, how you are going to build your network. And as we both know, especially in Luxembourg, it's so, so important.
Yeah, yeah. And I must say, actually, I didn't realize I was not always a fan of the word network in a way because I have seen people abuse it in other places and I've seen them climb it and that's not my personality. But when I could rephrase it as just support and people who will help you and just they have your best interests at heart and they want to help you and they want you to do well, that would be my preferred definition of a network.
Yeah, indeed. I mean, I think network could be understood in different ways, but I think at the core, it's exactly that, right? A support group who cheers you on and who has your back, hopefully, and who you can also contribute to, right? It is somehow, I see it as like reciprocal connection where we support each other and hence everyone within the community is supported and uplifted.
Mhm.
Yeah. So maybe to help our audience to get to know you a little more, Lisa, can you give us a quick rundown of what you do currently? You are a public figure, I must say. You are face of so many events, voice of, I'm assuming also, I haven't heard any of the voiceovers that you did, but I've seen you host, moderate so many events here in Luxembourg. So give us an overview of what you are currently doing and what are the types of clients you are working with.
Okay, yeah. Okay, so what I'm currently doing, I have the weekly talk show on RTL, so you can see it on RTL Play with video or Today Radio or Apple Podcasts and Spotify. So that's a weekly fixture, the weekly talk show where I have complete control over which topic I choose. I collect the guests, I prepare, record obviously and edit the show, so that's a weekly fixture. Aside from that, I moderate a lot of events and I truly love that work because it means I can deep dive into different industries. And so if I was to just take September to now, the people I've worked with are the European Space Agency. It's called ESA ESTEC. It's in Noordwijk in the Netherlands, but they had an event in Luxembourg. I worked with ESA EXAT in Harwell near Oxford in the UK, the European Commission, the European Investment Bank, and the European Investment Fund, a satellite space company and a research company in the Netherlands, in Amsterdam. I do Rock Lab, so completely different Rock Lab members meetings in Luxembourg. There'll be another event next week, so that's really fun and it brings me back to music. And then there was the art event at Mudam, the modern art museum here in Luxembourg. So effectively, I cover any event, but it would have a very keen focus from me when it comes to anything related to science or space, because as you alluded to, that's my background. Speaking of which, one thing I do from time to time is I either write or consult on children's science books. And so I've just been asked by Dorling Kindersley to work on a very big children's science book with somebody called Eric Carle. So for anybody with young children, they may know The Very Hungry Caterpillar. Well, Eric Carle's team are going to do a science book, a large one for 5 to 9-year-olds. So I'll work with that team next year.
Amazing. This is incredible. This is what I mean when I say you've built like a patchwork, right? This is exactly how I see somehow you manage to pool the things that I'm assuming you love doing and you're good at, right?
No.
And maybe we will get back to that question. But while we are on the topic of RTL, so our listeners understand, when you first moved to Luxembourg, RTL was not available in English, and you were the one who pitched the idea of starting the RTL today, doing it in English, providing English language coverage, especially for residents in Luxembourg. How did you pitch this concept to RTL, and what challenges did you face in establishing an English language news service where it never existed?
Yeah, so when I came here, I very quickly recognized there was not one place to get information in English, and people were using Facebook of all things, which even back then in 2015, 2016 seemed really old fashioned to me. And all of these, different community groups to find out a piece of information about whatever you need to know when you are moving country. And there's an awful lot of things you need to know when you move country, from health to schools to where do I get blah, 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 whatever it is. So just a kind of a community and a place to get news. And there was nothing of an umbrella group like that. And of course, I'd spent a decade of live news, where news doesn't just happen once a day, because we have the Lux Times here, and that was already established, and it has a super service, very, very good journalism, but nothing that updated in real time. And of course, that's the world we live in. We have it all around us in the world. So I also, when I moved here, I did, for a very short while, I set up a company with another lady, a media company, but I quite quickly realized that the way in which we both worked, it didn't align, the way I wanted to work and the way she wanted to work. So after a while, I closed that down. But effectively, to the point of RTL, I wrote to the CEO. I literally wrote to him with a couple of other people that were, high in the chain. And actually, God bless one of them, he recently died, too young.
I'm so sorry.
Steve Schmidt. But it was Tom Weber, who was head of digital at the time, Steve Schmidt, thinking of him and his family, who was head of content, and Christoph Goossens, who's the CEO. And so with the three of them and my business partner at the time, I wrote and I said, you have all of this information in Luxembourgish and in French, but we have a growing pool of international English-speaking people here, not even as a first language, but as the language of conversation in so many industries across finance, across tech, across science. It's the language that is used across, I think, where French used to be a second language for certain countries in Europe and beyond Europe, of course, it has turned to English. And I also include refugees in this. A lot of refugees coming to Luxembourg, their second language will be English. And so this is in March of, I think it was 2016, 17. I've lost track of time. And they all said, oh yeah, that's a good idea. So from March to December, we had a series of meetings, now and again. And myself and Natasha would be there, and I would be working all the time. And we effectively did this work for free, nearly, not a lot of money coming our way. We were given a very, very, very small budget because, of course, it was almost like a focus group, and so we were trying to think, how can we organize a team? And so the next problem was, the CEO thought, yeah, it's a great idea, let's do it. And so we put together all sorts of different budgets, but they kept pushing the budget very low. So what was very difficult for us was to go out and find people. First of all, it's very difficult to find journalists in Luxembourg. And part of the concept of RTL today is that they have a lot of the journalism already done in Luxembourgish. And it was a matter of converting that, translating it to English. But there are differences here, because the news that is for the Luxembourgish population is not the news that all of the international English-speaking people want. Some of it is. So first of all, there has to be an editorial choice of stories, because you will note also with the French news from RTL in Luxembourg, Their news is not the same either, of course, because the French speakers who want RTL news are often Belgian or French coming in across the border. And so the literal geographic location of their news is slightly different. So, firstly, there has to be editorial decision making. Secondly, we needed a group of people who could translate from Luxembourgish to English. And of course, as you know, there's lots of people who can speak both of those languages in Luxembourg, but to be able to translate in a very wonderfully easy to read and obviously next to native speaking English isn't entirely apparent. We had to sell people an idea of something that didn't exist. Will you come to work for this team that doesn't yet exist? The pay is not high. We don't know how it will go. We don't know how it will last. You will be a freelancer. There's no guarantee of anything.
Yeah.
So you're selling an idea. And so that it wasn't easy. But there we are, and it just has grown and grown and grown. And I never doubted the idea. I never doubted that we needed news in English. It was so obvious to me. It was zero doubt that it would be a success in my mind. Why did I do it? Well, first of all, I thought it was needed. It was the background I was from, but also I knew for the work that I wanted to do, I needed to have a platform on which to do it. Otherwise, you're fighting in the dark a little bit. And RTL has an extremely well-established name. Also, I have some French. I have GCSE French. I'm not fluent in French. I am almost no German, and I don't have Luxembourgish. So as you know, and many of these listeners will know, unless you're fluent in minimal 3 languages, you can't easily get many jobs available in Luxembourg. Also, my children were young and I wanted to have flexibility of time. So there were many, many decisions in why I realized I thought an English platform was absolutely necessary for the community here and also for the work I wanted to do, which I love long form conversation as a means to getting information, and the spoken word, 2 of the things I deeply love and care about. I needed a platform from which that could bounce.
Thank you so much for sharing that background story. And I have benefited from RTL today, the English version, as well as I know you have number of also podcasts that are hosted. I think there is recently one started, I think Luxembourg Moms or something, right? So there are these, I like that there are these thematic also podcasts for people like myself who are new to town, can really get accustomed, hopefully get all the information in English in one place. So that's great. Now I want us maybe to look at other areas of your work, because as I briefly mentioned, you are faced of so many events here in Luxembourg. From what I understand, most of them are science, space focused, but some of them are also in the art space, but they're quite diverse as well. And as we have also mentioned, you came to Luxembourg not knowing anyone. You had to build your network, build your support group, build a visibility, build a reputation in a place where no one knows you, who you are and what you are capable of. So help us understand, how did you establish yourself in the event space, for example? How did you build credibility, reputation, as well as visibility around you and your services, what you're capable of? And how did you go about connecting with audience, with these institutions and like European Space Agency or the Commission? Because I think for a lot of people who might have specific skill and they want to build a business around that skill, I think they can look up to you, and hopefully your story can also provide some inspiration and maybe some ideas.
Well, firstly, Luxembourg is small. So I really haven't done much outreach or you can, I mean, when you think Luxembourg is, I think, roughly about the size of Hastings in the UK. You can get to know people or they can get to know you. So I think the one I had a few things when I moved here. I had a very long established career in live news. I had a very strong science background. So I had that, but nobody knew and nobody cared. I didn't know anybody and they didn't know me. And why would they believe me, you know? So, and not only that, but I'd also had time out from when I'd left Sky News. I'd moved to Abu Dhabi with my then husband, back to London. So I was traveling around and I was feeling really very lost. And because we were in Abu Dhabi for 2 years, back in London for 3 years, I kept having to reintegrate the children. I didn't have a ton of time around the edges, and I sort of knew every time that, oh, we're moving again, right? Okay, so I can't integrate into anything. This is another reason why I knew I had to be flexible. So I had all of that in my mind. It started here, I think, when I got the chance to work with Digital Luxembourg, as it was known at the time, which is it was a government movement to talk about the startup world of Luxembourg. It was a government initiative to do some videos on the startup ecosystem of Luxembourg. And so I got the chance to obviously working with the government. It's a good platform. And there was a series of videos that we did for Startup Luxembourg and Digital Luxembourg, and they went very well. And I guess that was the first step of credibility. Then sort of in parallel, I'd written to RTL, and it happened that the CEO of RTL had spent some time working at Sky News in Victoria in the sales part of it. Actually, it's not on the news floor, based in Austerley. So he knew what it meant that I had that level of work. And he actually said at the time, we don't have many people with your background falling into Luxembourg, something like that. And in fact, he said at the time, the only other person he could think of was Adrian Wells, which was my ex-husband. And I thought, and I didn't want anything to be on his lapels. I wanted to do everything myself. And I did mention only after he mentioned it, and I'd made the connection, and I'd done the pitch. I then mentioned, oh, well, he's my ex-husband. Anyway, so the point is that there are a lot of people like you and other people, hopefully, I'm sure a lot of people listening. We have lived very different lives in different places, and we all come here in Luxembourg, and all we need is an opportunity to use the skills that we've developed in random different places around the world, but we land up here like a big stew of people. So yeah, my first was Digital Luxembourg, and then I think the other great serendipitous chance I had was the Luxembourg Space Agency opened about 5-6 years ago. And I was asked by the Deputy Prime Minister at the time, this is his brainchild, Etienne Schneider, his department, Ministry of Economy, to moderate the opening of the Luxembourg Space Agency. And I think, again, it was a combination of the fact that I can speak clearly in English.
You can speak well, very well.
I can stand on a stage and talk. We may come back to that as to why I can do that. And I have a science background, so I can understand the science and I can talk in English. They're basically my two skills. And I can stand on stage and I won't get nervous. So from the Luxembourg Space Agency, I've seen that grow and grow and grow, and I've become highly involved in the space segment here. But not only, really, I do cover everything: law, finance, everything. But yeah, I have a penchant for this space and science world, because I always want to give back to that community.
Yeah. And I think once you have showed yourself, proved yourself, right, with the initial project with the digital, or the Ministry of Economy, I think you said, right, you started to build credibility as well as connections within the government. And I guess word of mouth is very important in a small country like Luxembourg. And it is amazing how sometimes these, we call it serendipity, like somehow things come to place, like your diversity of background coming together, you moving into a very small country where on the face of it, you might think, how am I supposed to make use of myself in this small environment, right? Because a lot of people, I think, feel even claustrophobic, or how to say, like they feel like there are limited opportunities and only thing you can do is maybe get a full-time job, and there is a particular focus on finance, for example, here, right? For people coming from diverse backgrounds, it's very difficult. So you have this interesting story where somehow everything fit. You managed to put the pieces of the puzzle together to be able to build business around yourself using the skills that you have. And maybe we can touch upon here how, if any of the listeners are thinking maybe they don't have a full-time job, or maybe they have a full-time job and they are ready to transition into building their own business around the skills that they have. And as you said, a lot of people who come here, they are very international, have lived and done so many different things. Do you have any piece of advice, or maybe how you did it in your case? How did you manage to put together this puzzle? It's like bringing your public speaking expertise, writing books, or doing voiceover, hosting events, how one goes about putting all the skill sets together to put a solid offer that can then serve as your livelihood in a way.
Yeah. Well, the book thing was already a transportable thing, and it's not something that I rely on. It's an aside. So I've been doing that since 2005. So obviously you can read and write anywhere in the world. So that's not geographically anchored. The other things, I mean, I think what's really important is to rebuild self-confidence and self-esteem. If I was to say, of all of the things that need to be rebuilt in somebody moving country, and what often comes with this period of time, not often, maybe that's not correct, but you're looking after young children sometimes, and then sometimes there's divorce and all of these things that can hit you, and then you've lost your identity because you're not working in the way you used to work. And so many of us hinge our identity to work because that's what we're brought up to do educationally, and then we work and blah blah blah. I actually think step number one is to do something for yourself to build up your self-confidence, because if you're approaching people without an inner belief, they will feel that. And so you have to be sure of what skills do you have. And they don't have to say, I can do this job, this job, this job. What skills have you got? It's a different thing. Not what job can you do, what skills have you got? And then of course you can, there's so many options here, training, this, that, and the other, for very little money. I mean, I didn't really take advantage of those because I didn't have any time. But I guess in my case, I always knew, right, I needed that English platform in a kind of a news domain in order to then springboard off the work that I wanted to do. So I somehow knew inside me, even though I hadn't put it together in a business plan exactly, but I did know inside myself. Although it's very hard to see in the moment when you feel vulnerable, which you do when you move country, I think, you don't literally, as you said, you don't know anybody, and you're having to think about your children settling in and then yourself. And I would actually bring it right back, and I would say step number one is to somehow, in whatever way works for you, to build up yourself again. I think that's the first place. And whatever that means to another person, it might mean health, look after your health, literally eating, sleeping. It might mean take a little bit of time out and treat yourself to something. I'm talking about small things. It might mean do some work and have a little win, a little win, a little win. And with each piece of work, I've never gone out to try to get work really, apart from the beginning when I was just talking to people, but not massively. If you do a good job in Luxembourg, it's small enough where people will think, okay, Durson, I know her because she did this. I met her here. She's really good at this. I might talk to her for this job. It will flow. So then just try and get the small first step and the second step, and then it will flow. But step number one is yourself.
Yeah, especially for people who are in any kind of transition, moving countries, moving careers, or moving from parenthood, being full-time kind of stay-at-home mom or dad, going back to work, it can be quite challenging, and especially for self-esteem and self-confidence. So I agree with that part, that I think it's so important to start small. And if you can prove yourself that you can do this small thing, I think that gives you a little bit of confidence to go out and do a little bit more and more. Maybe to also, because as I see it, and correct me if I'm wrong, or maybe you see it differently, the fact that you worked at Sky News doing live reporting, I feel like that served as the core. So, and you have relied and used that skill, the ability to speak in front of a camera. I'm assuming also speak in front of public, to be able to speak in an articulate, in a clear and confident manner. Has that formed the core of your skill set or what you offer as a service? Or how do you see this? What were the core skills that you picked up to be able to do this patchwork that we were talking about?
So I think if I was to boil it right down, and it only has occurred to me relatively recently, I think what I can do is I can take on board quite a lot of information in a short space of time. And it can be tough, hard technical information, or information of a political situation, or biological situation, or brain health. That was another event. So whatever the topic, finance, law, whatever the topic, I can take on board difficult information. I can sieve it out for what I think are the pertinent facts for the audience that I am talking to. So information, sieve, communicate to the audience that is required for this information. The public speaking, I started public speaking at the age of 11. In my secondary school, when I started, there was a public speaking club. And my mum said, that would be a good club to join. I wish I had that chance when I was younger. It's a great skill to have. So I joined it, and myself, and there was a team of three of us, Selena Murray at the time, and Leandra O'Sullivan. And God bless Leandra, she also died a couple of years ago, unfortunately, too young. Anyway, so we were a team of three, and we did many, many competitions. We won many national competitions in the UK, and I remember going to many of the finals in London near the Science Museum and the Natural History Museum. So I got through my fear with my knees shaking and absolute fear of standing in front of people from the age of 11 to 18. So that was one thing for public speaking. The second thing was that I have always done music my whole life, going back to Ireland when I was a child in Ireland. Then my family moved to London when I was 10. And I talk about music because, of course, the other side of music is performance. So whether I was playing violin or piano or singing, and singing is the thing I keep up to this day. Firstly, through singing, you learn how to breathe correctly. And musicality, you understand subconsciously what that can bring to the voice. And it is also performance on stage through the spoken word, in a way. So I would say the combination of Mr. Devereux's public speaking club at the Ursuline High School, the music, and particularly the singing, and all of my wonderful singing teachers I've had through my life. And then Sky News, the reason I got the job in the first place at Sky News was because I was employed by somebody who had done physics at Imperial, and he knew what science I was doing. And he believed in my science because I was first employed to do weather forecasting, both the science and the presenting. So I was hired because I was using science and I could talk.
So you already had the speaking skills, if I may say, yeah.
Yeah. And then, of course, 10 years of having an earpiece in your ear, people saying, speak for 30 seconds, speak for 3 minutes. And, you're wearing this earpiece and you're live, that's a good training ground.
Indeed. Yeah, no, amazing. Thank you for giving us glimpse of your background, as well as how you brought these different skill sets together. I think it's so important, even for people who want to start a business or who want to pursue a career, understanding what are the core skills that help them to be who they are and maybe stand out from the crowd. I think is so important.
And just to add, and sorry to interrupt you, just to say that you might not know that whatever it is you're doing, badminton on the side or calligraphy, which I also did, by the way, or whatever it is, a jazz group you belong, you don't know when they might come into your life. So don't give up the hobbies.
Indeed, I think it's so important. And when we do other things like hobbies, even if they are not directly related to our business or our profession, they do add they do add a lot of benefits that we can rip off. We are reaching the end of our conversation, Lisa. I have so many other questions, but I will ask you one more question. This question was left for you by my previous guest. They left this question without knowing who they are leaving it for. The question reads, what role has failure played in your success? And is there a particular setback that shaped who you are today?
Failure, how has that formed me? I think the question is asking me how has failure formed me.
Or yeah,
Well,
what
I'm divorced.
what role it played in your success?
The thing that I think about is the fact that my marriage, to use the phrase that most people use, didn't work out for very, very tough reasons. And we won't talk about it, but that period, very long period of my life, was extremely hard at times and broke me. So I had to build myself up from scratch. I think I've always been empathetic, but I would say I'm deeply empathetic now. But I think I've always been empathetic, but I know what a black hole feels like. And I know that everything I do is because I want to be a rock for my daughters. So that failure brought me to the lowest point in my life over a very long period of time. It damaged my health, I would say. And what's come out of that is a true independence in every part of my life. I don't need anyone for anything in my life. And if there are people in my life, it's because they bring joy to my life. And hopefully I bring joy to other people's lives. But the failure has led to an extreme independence and the want to be the rock for my girls.
Well, thank you so much, Lisa, for sharing that. And I'm so sorry you had to go through a challenging personal situation. And I think indeed a lot of us can relate. We face challenges in our personal lives or professional lives. And at times looking back, it's easier to say, oh, that has been the best thing that has happened to me, or I have come out stronger, wiser. In your case, your biggest takeaway was to learn to be independent and learn to be also self-sufficient, especially for your daughters. So yeah, Lisa, I think you demonstrated today to our listeners, at least to me, the importance of, yeah, following your passions, doing different things and finding a way to bring them together whenever it makes sense. And also really focusing on the importance of time, as you said, as we started the conversation, right? Time is the most valuable thing that any of us have. So when we spend our time working or doing a business, it better be things that we love doing and things that bring us joy and fulfillment. And I think you have also, your story demonstrated that anyone can start a business around the skill set that they have. What they need to do is maybe reflect a bit to understand what are the core skill set that they can kind of patch together, right? And also think in terms of, especially if they are in a transitioning period, as you've highlighted, the importance of building self-confidence and starting slow with baby steps, and hopefully, yeah, from one day to another, you might be able to make a gigantic steps towards success. So thank you so much, Lisa, for being on the Inside Story podcast and sharing your story.
Well, thank you so much. I feel very honored. And yeah, I think the other thing I would add is just don't be hard on yourself. Try to be kind to yourself because, well, we're not always good at doing that.
Indeed. And it's so important. Self-love, self-care, self-respect. Because I think everything that you want to give others and everything you want to receive from others starts from self. How do you treat yourself and how do you show up for yourself?
Yeah.
So thank you so much.
Thank you so much. And good luck to you as well, Jerson. Thank you so much.